My name is Ayesha. I'm 40 years old now. 18 years ago, when I was 22, I met him for the first time. I still remember that afternoon like it was pressed between the pages of a book I opened too often. It was early winter. The air was soft, not too cold, and the sky looked pale and thoughtful. I was standing at a roadside tea stall near my office, holding a paper cup that warmed my hands. That's when I saw him. He wasn't doing anything extraordinary, just laughing with his friends. But there was something about the way he laughed, free, careless, almost musical. It made me look twice. His name was Samir. He was younger than me by a few years, but I didn't know that at first. All I knew was that whenever he passed by after that day, my heart reacted before my mind could. At 28, I had already learned to hide my feelings. Life had taught me that emotions should be folded neatly and kept inside. But Samir, he unfolded something in me. We didn't fall in love instantly. It was slow, painfully slow. It started with small conversations about the weather, about work, about random things like how he hated bitter coffee and how I couldn't survive without it. He would tease me for being too serious, and I would tease him for being too immature. But somewhere between those jokes, something deeper began to grow. For 8 years, he was part of my everyday life. 8 years of shared chai breaks. 8 years of late-night phone calls. 8 years of him saying, "You worry too much," and me replying, "And you don't worry enough." He would bring me small things, not expensive gifts, just thoughtful ones. A bookmark because I loved reading. A tiny cactus because he said, "It survives even when you forget it sometimes." Like me. I still have that cactus. It sits by my window, taller now, but just as stubborn. We faced resistance. Of course we did. People talked. "She's older. He's too young. It won't last." But we lasted 8 years. 8 beautiful, imperfect years. When he finally proposed, it wasn't dramatic. No fancy restaurant, no grand gesture. Just him, standing nervously in my living room, holding a small ring box that looked slightly crooked in his trembling hands. "Ayesha," he said, "I don't want another 8 years like this. I want forever." I laughed and cried at the same time. Our wedding was set for December, the house filled with preparations, fabrics, flowers, relatives calling nonstop. My mother would measure curtains while humming old songs. I would secretly look at my bridal dress every night, touching the embroidery carefully, imagining how he would look at me. He used to call me every evening during those days. "2 more days," he would say excitedly. 2 more days, I would repeat, pretending to be calm. 2 days before the wedding, he went out to finalize some last-minute arrangements. He said he would be back by evening. He told me not to stress and promised he'd bring my favorite chocolate. That was the last time I heard his voice. The phone rang around sunset. I remember the exact sound of it. Sharp, loud, disturbing the quiet of the house. It wasn't him. It was someone else. A stranger's voice. Serious, urgent. There had been a car accident. The words felt unreal. Like they belonged to someone else's story. Not mine. I don't remember the ride to the hospital clearly. I only remember my hands shaking and the world feeling too bright, too loud. My heart kept whispering, "He'll be fine. He'll be fine." But he wasn't. By the time I reached there, everything had already ended. They told me it was instant, that he didn't suffer. I clung to that sentence for years. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I just stood there, still empty. 2 days before forever ended. The wedding decorations were still being delivered to our house when his funeral prayers were being prepared. I packed away my bridal dress myself. I folded it slowly, carefully, as if I was folding a dream that had never fully opened. After that, life didn't stop. That was the hardest part. The sun still rose. People still went to work. Cars still moved on the same road where his had stopped. But inside me, something froze at 28. Years passed. People suggested I move on. Some proposed new matches. Some spoke gently. Some spoke harshly. "You're still young. You can't live alone forever." Maybe they were right. But how do you explain that loving someone for 8 years changes the shape of your heart? I tried. I really did. I focused on my career. I traveled alone sometimes. I learned how to fix small things in the house that he used to handle. I paid bills. I attended weddings of others. I smiled in photographs. But every December, I'd disappear a little. On the day that was supposed to be my wedding anniversary, I sit by my window with a cup of bitter coffee, the kind he hated, and I talk to him in my heart. I tell him about my day, about how the cactus has grown, about how I finally learned to laugh a little more, the way he used to. Do I still feel sad? Yes, not the sharp, unbearable pain of the first year. That was like walking with broken glass inside my chest. Now it's quieter. It's like an old song playing softly in the background. Always there. Sometimes I see a car that looks like his and my breath catches for a second. Sometimes I hear someone laugh like him and my heart forgets reality. But I survived. That's the strange thing about grief. You think it will kill you, but it doesn't. It changes you instead. At 40, I am not the same woman I was at 28. I am softer in some ways, stronger in others. I learned that love doesn't disappear just because the person does. It transforms, it becomes memory, it becomes silence, it becomes strength. People often ask me if I regret loving him. Never. If I could go back knowing everything, I would still choose those 8 years. Because in those 8 years, I felt alive. I felt chosen. I felt seen. And even thought my story didn't end with a wedding dot, it still had love in it. And sometimes, that has to be enough. I never thought I would say this, but there came a day when I realized I was tired of only surviving. For years after Samir died, I lived like someone guarding a museum. Every memory of him was carefully preserved. I was afraid that if I smiled too much, if I allowed someone new into my life, I would somehow betray him. Grief became my identity. People stopped asking me to move on after a while. They began to accept that I was the woman whose fiancé died. It was almost like a title attached to my name. And maybe I accepted it too. But time is strange. It doesn't ask for permission. It moves quietly, reshaping things you thought were permanent. I was 33 when I met him. His name was Arman. We met at a colleague's birthday dinner. I almost didn't go that evening. I remember standing in front of my wardrobe, staring at my clothes, feeling that familiar heaviness. Social gatherings had become exhausting for me. Too many happy couples, too many questions. But I went. Arman was sitting across the table, listening more than he was speaking. I noticed that first. In a room full of loud laughter, he was calm, observant. His eyes had a softness in them. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady. He wasn't like Samir. Samir was sunshine, bright, loud, spontaneous. Arman was more like early morning light, gentle, quiet, patient. When he first spoke to me, it wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't intense. He simply asked, "Do you prefer tea or coffee?" And when I said coffee, he smiled and said, "Strong, I'm guessing." It surprised me. "Yes," I replied, almost offensively. "I can tell," he said softly. "You seem like someone who carries a lot." That sentence stayed with me. We started talking occasionally after that. Nothing dramatic, no late-night confessions. Just simple conversations about books, about work, about how he loved rainy evenings and how I preferred winter mornings. He was caring in the smallest ways. If I mentioned I had a headache, he would text later asking if I had taken medicine. If I had a stressful meeting, he would send a short message. "You've handled worse. You'll be fine." He never tried to replace Samir. He never even asked about my past at first, and maybe that's why I felt safe. But the truth is, I was scared. Every time my heart softened a little, guilt followed. How can you feel something again? How can you allow another name to sit where someone else once lived? One evening after months of friendship, he asked if we could talk seriously. We met at a quiet park. The trees were shedding leaves, and the air smelled like autumn. I remember folding my hands tightly in my lap, preparing myself. "I know you've been hurt," he said gently. I don't need to know everything unless you want to tell me, but I want you to know I'm not here to compete with anyone from your past. I'm here because I like who you are now. Those words broke something inside me, not painfully but softly. For the first time, I spoke openly about Samir, about the accident, about the wedding dress, about the cactus by my window. Armin listened without interrupting. No jealousy, no discomfort, just understanding. When I finished, I was crying quietly. I will never ask you to forget him, he said, but I hope one day you'll make space for me too. That night, I realized something important. Moving on does not mean erasing. For years, I thought I had to choose either stay loyal to my past or open the door to my future. But the heart is not a small room. It's larger than we think. Slowly, very slowly, I allowed myself to breathe differently. I stopped comparing. Arman didn't laugh like Samir. He didn't tease me the same way. He didn't bring chaos into a room. But he brought peace. He was patient with my silences. When I had bad days in December, he didn't try to distract me aggressively. He would simply sit beside me with a warm cup of coffee and let me speak or not speak. Years passed. The first time I realized I had gone an entire day without thinking about the accident. I felt shocked, then guilty, then relieved. Healing is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in ordinary days. At 36, I said yes again, not with the trembling excitement of a girl dreaming of fairy tales, but with the calm understanding of a woman who has known loss and still chooses love. Our wedding was simple, small gathering, soft lights, no loud music. When I walked toward Arman, I wasn't replacing my past. I was honoring the fact that I had survived it. Now, at 40, I can say this honestly. I did not forget Samir. I carry him as a chapter of my life, beautiful, painful, unforgettable. But Arman is the present tense of my story, and that makes all the difference. If there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Love is not limited. You can love deeply once. You can lose. You can break. And you can still love again. Moving on does not mean you loved less. It means you are brave enough to live again. Life will not always give you the ending you planned. Sometimes it will tear the pages apart, but that doesn't mean the book is over. We are allowed to grieve. We are allowed to remember, and we are allowed to begin again. If my story teaches anything, let it be this. Do not close your heart forever because it once broke. Do not punish your future for the pain of your past. And never feel guilty for choosing happiness twice. Because surviving is not the same as living. And after everything I lost, I finally learned how to live again.